Hello everyone, with the Jamaica here. Welcome to this updated video on the weather across Jamaica and the Caribbean. It is Wednesday evening, March 15th, 2023. Now before we jump into it, please ensure that you guys like the video, share it, subscribe and tap notification bell so that you'll be notified every time I post a brand new video. Also feel free to leave a comment down in the comment section letting me know what the weather has been like in your area recently. Also feel free to ask any weather related question that you might have about the future of the weather in your specific area. I respond to all comments and I really live for this stuff. Okay, so let us take a look at the significant feature map across the Atlantic for this evening. We can see that we have a high pressure ridge right there to the north of the main development region that's responsible for sending some amount of easterly trade winds across the main development region into the Caribbean. And we can also see that cold front that's right now situated across portions of the Bahamas, Cuba and the northwestern Caribbean. Keeping in mind that this cold front should be situated right to the north of Jamaica by 7 a.m. on Thursday morning. If we actually take a look at the visible satellite images before the sun went down, we can see that we have those winds pushing those low-level clouds from east to west, all courtesy of that high pressure across the main development region into the Caribbean. And we can also see that we have those clouds associated with that cold front across portions of the Bahamas, Cuba, Jamaica, even portions of the Cayman Islands as well. Alright, so let us talk about the forecast that was made for today's weather yesterday. Excuse me. It was stated in our post highlighting our video from yesterday, stating that we would have received some amount of rainfall across sections of most parishes. Although it did indeed pan out, it didn't affect sections of some southern coastal areas as one would expect. We had more of the rainfall concentrated across portions of northern Jamaica, because if we actually take a look at the Doppler radar images from about 4:20 a.m., we actually had the Euro and the GFS panning out with all of the rainfall that was predicted to be affecting the waters to the north as well as around the island. Then moving ahead to about 12:01 p.m., we actually saw that we had more of a buildup of clouds across mainly northern Jamaica and western Jamaica. So portions of Portland, St. Mary, St. Anne, Trelawney, St. James, Hanover got in on some of that. We even had some amount of rainfall across portions of western St. Catherine as well as portions of Clarendon right there. Even sections of Manchester got in on some amount of rainfall. Moving ahead to about 3:05 p.m., we even had the infrared satellite images showing some sparkling white dots which are indicative of some amount of lightning flashes and thunder right there off the coast of St. Anne, Trelawney and St. Mary right there. So we indeed got some amount of afternoon thunderstorms, and look where the wind shear is pushing it off towards the east northeast. So considering that it's going more towards the north, that would explain the bias for majority of the rainfall being across portions of northern Jamaica for today. If we actually take a look at the comments now, we can actually see that we had some confirmation of the rainfall across northern Jamaica today. Samantha Kelly stating, yes, Moby got a lot of it and I'm super happy. Moving on, we also had Jamaican Gal 69 posting a video highlighting Montego Bay and the rainfall that she's experiencing there. Moving on to another post, Chris Phillips stating, got some well needed rain earlier, just overcast and cool now. Sandrine stating, it's been raining since after 10 this morning, non-stop. We really needed it. Don Carlos stating, thunder and moderate rain heavy at times in Prairie St. Anne. Moving on, we can see that J. Ann stated, getting rain in Mobe, praises be to the Most High. And Siran stating, raining in St. Mary, as well as GR stating raining earlier. Moving on to another post, we can see PG876 stating rain fall in the west, yes. Brielle Patton stating central Manchester overcast with a slight drizzle now. Moving over to our Instagram post, we can see that Makeda stating beer rain a fall a Mobi right now. And moving on to another post, we can see Hurricane 876, my brethren, a state Rain in some parts of Clarendon. Another commenter, Bartab, stating I got 5-minute drizzle in Portmore this morning. More would be nice. Summer January 16 stating yes, which more than likely means that she's getting some amount of rainfall in her specific area. Kirby stating in my area the weather is weathering. And Zishane stating it's happening in Mobe. Another person from Mobe stating raining now in Mobe. Another person, First Lady Shanique, stating raining in St. James, and I'm loving it. Another person, Latisha, stating raining in Negril. Another person, Sherry Lips Mel, stating raining in St. Anne. Tony Nika 22 stating raining in St. James. And Fascination 876 stating dry in Ligani, Kingston, and sun in and out. So apparently, yes, we did have dry conditions across majority of Kingston and St. Andrew, as well as majority of St. Catherine, but we did indeed have some amount of rainfall across the island. It was really heavy in some spots. Nicoya Francis stating it's been raining since midday in Linstead, St. Catherine. So not all of St. Catherine was dry. We actually had some amount of rainfall across some spots, more than likely the northern sections. The rain really fall hard in the day and still drizzling in Mobe. Moving on, we can still see that majority of the south coast got dry weather. Madeline stating St. Anne North Coast is rainy. Spaniard 315A stating very wet and still raining in Mobe and Friendship St. James. Forever Blessed stating raining in St. Elizabeth, Black River. Layla, Mom 26, stating tearing like wow in Westmoreland. And that should be Lashe Bukatori stating rained in Mobe. So we actually indeed had some amount of confirmation of the rainfall across the island for today. If we actually take a look at the visible satellite images before the sun went down, we can see that yes, we had that buildup of clouds, and we can see those high level clouds being streaked off towards the east northeast, with majority of the clouds situated across portions of northern and western Jamaica. So those very spots is actually where we actually had that rainfall. Even the Doppler radar image, before it actually glitched out, we can see that the latest Doppler radar images from the Cuban Doppler radar site is showing up to, let's say, after about 4 p.m. today, about 3 o'clock Jamaica time actually. So we can see where all of the rainfall was located. We even had some amount of yellows and reds in there that's indicative of heavy and severe rainfall right there off the north coast, with some of the rainfall coming into sections of St. Elizabeth and Manchester, as well as portions of Westmoreland in the late afternoon hours. If you actually take a look at the Caribbean Institute for Meteorology and Hydrology website, this map is showing all the rainfall that we had over the past 24 hours. And just as stated by our commenters and just as seen on the satellite images, we actually had majority of the rainfall across portions of northern Jamaica. So portions of St. Mary, St. Anne, Trelawney, St. James, Hanover, as well as portions of Westmoreland, St. Elizabeth, as well as portions of Manchester getting in on some amount of rainfall as well. If we actually take a look at the temperatures for tonight, we can see that we have 24 degrees Celsius in Kingston and 23 degrees Celsius in Montego Bay. It makes sense that they're not receiving 25 degrees Celsius, especially considering the rain that they got today, so the temperatures would be cooler. And considering that all of this is being caused by a cold front, we know that usually the backside of a cold front follows the cooler than average temperatures. And we can see that both the Euro and the GFS are showing that to the north of Jamaica at 1 p.m. on Thursday, we should be getting in on some amount of below average temperatures, making its way closer to Jamaica, if not already there. And if we're going to be getting below average temperatures of at least 1 to 2 degrees Celsius, what are the average temperatures for the month of March? About 87 degrees Fahrenheit. And when we calculate that on the thermometer, that's about the equivalent of about 30 degrees Celsius or 31 degrees Celsius. And if we're going to be getting 2 degrees Celsius or less below average temperatures, we should be experiencing anywhere from 28 to 31 degrees Celsius at most for tomorrow. If we actually take a look at the dry air map, we can see that the driest air is situated right there off the coast of Western Africa, as indicated on the keys with all of those reds and whites, while Jamaica is in some blues at this time. So we're, receiving some amount of moist air. The air is not dry at all, especially with the cold front in our area at this time. Moving on to the Saharan dust map, 2 p.m. on Thursday, we can see that we still have some amount of lingering slight Saharan dust across the Jamaica area, but majority of that is dissipating at this time. If we want to see actual hazy skies and all of that triggering respiratory illnesses, we would see lots of darker browns like what we're seeing right there off the western coast of Africa. So right now we're getting the least of it, and we hope that it remains that way. If we actually take a look at the wave forecast for tomorrow, we can see that Jamaica is surrounded by the blues. If we look at the keys, the blues are indicative of anywhere from 1.5 meter wave height or less, and that is what we see on both the Euro and the GFS models. And when we have consensus like this, the chances of it actually happening are much higher. And the reason for this is due to the fact that we'll be getting less winds across the island, especially the south coast tomorrow. We can see that the backside of that cold front is bringing more of a east-northeast or northeasterly kind of flow across the island. So when we actually start to get in on more of those yellows across the region, that's when we would normally see that wave height building across the waters around the area. So as the cold front progresses eastward and southward, the seas should begin to get choppy later on in the week. However, if we actually take a look at both the wind forecasts, we can see that the winds will be more dominant coming in from the northeast, maybe even up to 10 to maybe even 25 knots. So it will definitely be windy on the north coast tomorrow. And look at where the blues are located, and we know that the blues indicate where we are going to be having all of that air piling up. And we know what happens when all of this air piles up, especially during the afternoon hours. We actually have that buildup of clouds and afternoon convection, and we actually see majority of it across portion of southern Jamaica. So we might get in on some heavy thunderstorms across portions of Westmoreland, St. Elizabeth, Manchester, Clarendon, St. Catherine, Kingston, and St. Andrew. So tomorrow is definitely our day, just like how today was the North Coast day. Moving on, if we actually take a look at the wind shear map, just as stated, the wind shear was coming more from the west southwest today, moving to the east northeast. So more than likely there would have been a bias across portion of northern Jamaica with the rainfall. But look at where the wind shear is coming tomorrow. It's coming more from the west northwest across the island. So any form of convection that we get from the low level winds and the clouds will be pushed off if the clouds build up to the upper levels of the atmosphere, becoming thunderclouds or cumulonimbus clouds. They will be pushed off towards the east southeast, so that will cause majority of the rainfall to linger across southern Jamaica tomorrow, probably triggering some amount of flash flooding in some spots as well. Moving on to the precipitation forecast, we can see that for 12 a.m. tonight, we know that 1 a.m. Eastern Standard Time stands for 12 a.m. midnight tonight Jamaica time. We can see some amount of rainfall blues that indicate rainfall right there across portions of northern and western Jamaica. And if you actually take a look at the GFS model, we have consensus with that, and we know that when we have consensus, when we have agreement with both models, the chances of it actually happening are much higher. Moving ahead to 2 hours later, at around 2 a.m. we still see much of the same thing. More blues across portions of northern Jamaica tonight and western Jamaica. So maybe Westmoreland, Negril, Hanover, St. James, Trelawney, St. Anne, St. Mary, Portland will still be getting in on some more rainfall. Moving ahead 2 hours later than that, we can see that we have some amount of rainfall at about, at about 4 a.m. excuse me. So about 4 a.m. we still see that we have that rainfall across portions of northern Jamaica. Moving ahead 2 hours later at 6 a.m. we'll still see that we have much of that rainfall. We know that when all that rainfall is accumulating across a specific area, that's a lot of rainfall. Considering that we're in a drought, it is not that much of a bad thing. But however, if we get too much of it at once, that is when we get some amount of flood triggering rainfall. Skipping ahead to about 12 p.m. on Thursday, midday on Thursday, we start to see a lot of blues on the Euro model, even getting into some colors up in there, greens and yellows, indicative of some strong rainfall across portion of southern Jamaica. Look at Westmoreland, St. Elizabeth, Manchester right there. The GFS is showing some blues, but it is not as robust as the Euro model. Either way, we see consensus considering that both of the models are showing rainfall, especially with the darkest blues across portion of southern Jamaica. So we know that sections of those spots, Westmoreland, St. Elizabeth, Manchester, Clarendon, St. Catherine, Kingston, and St. Andrew, even portion of St. Thomas might get in on some amount of rainfall tomorrow. That's 12 p.m. Skipping ahead 2 hours later to about 2 p.m., we see even more colors showing up across majority of the island on the Euro. The GFS is not that robust. We still have more darker blues across majority of the island, especially the south coast. Skipping ahead to 2 hours later to about 4 p.m. now. We still have that rainfall across the island on the Euro, and the GFS is starting to show some colors, maybe even up in a green up in there across portions of Clarendon. So we shall see exactly what unfolds. Ensure that you bring your rain gear tomorrow so that you're not that drastically affected. There seems to be a lot of rainfall that's being predicted across the island for tomorrow, and it is quite shocking considering that it is the month of March. If we actually take a look at the accumulated precipitation forecast, both the Euro and the GFS models are showing all the rainfall that we're expected to receive from now up until 3Z on Friday. When we calculate that, that's all the rainfall that we're expecting to receive up until 10 p.m. on Thursday. We can see that both the Euro and the GFS are showing some reds up in there as well. That's indicative of over an inch of rainfall, 1.07 on the GFS actually. And we can also see up to 1.37 inches of rainfall across portions of the Euro. On the Euro, we see across portions of western Jamaica. So we're definitely in for some amount of rainfall, and considering that winds are coming in more from the northeast tomorrow, the bias will be across portions of southern Jamaica the most. Majority of the rainfall on the north coast should be occurring during the morning hours, while the afternoon will be our time on the south coast. So try to take the necessary precautions so that you're not that drastically affected. Just as stated, we usually get one of our least rainy months, March. We usually get some of the least amount of rainfall across the area in the month of March. So any amount of rainfall that we receive this month is much welcomed. Alright, so that's it for the forecast across Jamaica. Let's talk about the rest of the Caribbean. So we can see that majority of the Caribbean, especially the Eastern Caribbean, is in the clear. We can see some amount of patches of clouds across portions of Puerto Rico, Hispaniola. We can see the clouds associated with that cold front across portions of the southern tip of Florida, the Bahamas, the Turks and Caicos, Cuba, the Cayman Islands, sections of Honduras. We can also see some buildup of clouds across portions of Costa Rica and Colombia right there. Taking a look at the Doppler radar images of the northeastern Caribbean, we know that Doppler radar images show the actual rainfall across a specific area. We don't see much of anything across the area. Let's put these images into motion from 1:40 p.m. today. We can see some amount of rainfall right there across portions of northern section of Puerto Rico as well as sections of the British Virgin Islands, and then it dissipated as the afternoon progressed. Moving along to portions of the Barbados radar and the areas around it, we can see that for the most part we see some amount of scattered showers right there across portions of Tobago, maybe even spilling to portions of Trinidad right there. If we actually take a look at the wider view of Doppler radar images, we can see those greens and blues associated with the rainfall caused by the cold front across portions of the Bahamas and the southern tip of Florida. We can also see some dots of green that represent rainfall across portions of Guatemala and Honduras associated with that cold front. And we can also see some greens across portions of Colombia affecting those areas with some amount of rainfall. Let's talk temperature forecast now. We can see that both the Euro and the GFS models are showing below average temperatures from anywhere from the Gulf of Mexico, Florida, the Bahamas, Turks and Caicos, Hispaniola, Cuba, as well as to the waters to the north of Jamaica. Below average temperatures for tomorrow. You know that when we have consensus like this, the chances of it actually happening are much higher. However, we see some above average temperatures right there across portions of the northern coast of Venezuela, the waters to the north, and maybe the ABC Islands, as well as portions of the Leeward Islands right there. That's where the above normal temperatures will be located. We can also see above normal temperatures across portions of Texas and as well as Mexico right there. However, we see some below average temperatures right there to the south or the southern windward island. So portions of Barbados westward and southward. So areas like St. Vincent, Grenada, Trinidad and Tobago, and areas to the south and east of there. So maybe the eastern portion of Venezuela, portions of Guyana, French Guiana, and Suriname getting in on some of those below average temperatures. And both maps are showing 1 p.m. on Thursday. If we actually take a look at the Saharan dust forecast, as stated, we can see that majority of the dust is dissipating at this time, especially considering that the cold front is helping with that dissipation. Majority of the darkest browns seem to be right there across portions of the main development region and Africa, so we don't have much of anything to worry about at this time. If we actually take a look at the wave forecast, we can see that the highest wave heights for 12 p.m. on a Thursday seem to be right there across the waters to the north of Hispaniola. That's where we see majority of the 2-meter wave heights or more, all courtesy of those strong winds brought about by that cold front right there across portions of Bermuda. And we can see that the strongest winds across the Caribbean will be coming in from the northeast, right there across portions of the Cayman Islands, portions of Cuba, portions of the Turks and Caicos, northern Hispaniola as well. And we see that on both the Euro and the GFS, and we know that when we have consensus like this, the chances of it actually happening are much higher. Moving on to where the rainfall is expected. Now we can see that we have a lot of reds that are indicative of maybe even up to an inch of rainfall or more across portions of these very same spots that are going to be affected by that cold front. So from Honduras, Nicaragua, portions of Costa Rica, Colombia getting in on some of that rainfall as well. You can see rainfall across Jamaica as stated earlier, portions of eastern Cuba, portions of the Bahamas and the Turks and Caicos, portions of Hispaniola, as well as portions of Puerto Rico getting in on some of that. And we see consensus in these very same spots that were just mentioned on the GFS model as well. We know that when we have consensus like this, the chances of it actually happening are much higher. Moving on to the western portion of the basins, the sections of Mexico, portions of Guatemala, Belize and Honduras, still going to be receiving rainfall, but it is not that robust. They should be receiving up to at least 0.5 of an inch of rainfall in some spots. The heaviest rainfall seems to be right there, even up to an inch across portions of Guatemala right there with those reds. So if you are affected, try to take necessary precautions so that you're not that drastically affected by the flooding. Alright, so that's it for today. Thanks for watching.